Think about the year 1992, The Cure releases Friday, I'm in Love. It's a massive, bright, shiny pop song. People are smiling, dancing and falling in love to the voice of Robert Smith. It's the sound of pure, simple joy. It plays on every radio station around the world. Now, we rewind exactly 10 years. The year is 1982. That same voice, that same man leans into the microphone in the dark, dirty room and sings a very different line. It doesn't matter if we all die. This is the first line of The Cure's fourth album, Pornography. There is no dancing here, there is no sunshine. There's only a crushing wall of noise and a deep, heavy darkness. Before they went into the studio, Robert Smith was only 22 years old, but he felt like an old man at the end of his life. He was drowning in deep depression and heavy drug use. He was at the absolute edge. He later said a famous sentence about this exact moment in his life. He said, "I had two choices, kill myself or make this record." Tonight, we are going to look at what happens when a group of young men lock themselves in a room to face their worst nightmares. We are going to look at how a band pushed themselves to the edge of destruction, destroyed their own friendship, and somehow, by complete accident, built one of the greatest post-punk albums in history. To understand how dark this album really is, you have to understand the world that built it. We are in the United Kingdom in the early 1980s. The bright, plastic colors of the late 80s have not arrived yet. Instead, Britain under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher is a cold, hard place for the youth. By 1982, unemployment in the UK passes 3 million. That is a massive number. It is the highest rate since the 1930s. Whole towns are losing their jobs, factories are closing down, the streets are tense. Just a year earlier, there were huge violent riots in places like Brixton in London and Totstep in Liverpool. There is a feeling of anger in the air, but also a deep, heavy feeling of uselessness. On top of this, the Cold War is still happening. Young people grew up with the real fear of nuclear war. The news was constantly full of fear. A few years earlier, punk music had exploded. It was fast, loud, and full of anger. Punk said, "Burn the system down." But by 1981 and 1982, the fire of punk had burned out. The system did not burn down, the system won. The youth were left standing in the cold ashes. This was the birth of post-punk. The music slowed down, the bass lines got heavy. The guitars did not sound like weapons anymore, they sounded like ghosts. At this time, The Cure had already released two very dark albums, 17 Seconds in 1980 and Faith in 1981. They were famous for this cold, grey sound. They were the kings of the sad kids. But playing the music every single night was destroying them. During the Faith tour, the crowds would just stand there in silence, and Robert Smith would often cry on stage. The music was not a performance or an act. It was real, and it was eating his mind alive. They were the leaders of a new movement, the Gothic rock scene, even if they hated the label. But they were deeply exhausted. They were young men carrying the weight of a dying generation. They were sick of the music business, sick of the endless touring, and honestly, they were getting extremely sick of each other. They decided that the next album would be their absolute last. They wanted to make something so heavy, so ugly, and so pure that it would burn the band to the ground. They wanted to commit career suicide. Imagine walking into the high-end music studio in London. Usually, it is clean, professional, and quiet. But in early 1982, The Cure moved into Rack Studios and turned it into a living nightmare. They knew they wanted to make an ugly record, so they created an ugly environment. They completely reversed their sleeping habits. They slept all day when the sun was out. They only woke up when the sun went down. They lived completely in the dark, cutting themselves off from the normal world. But living in the dark was not enough. They needed the physical space to match the world in their minds, so they stopped cleaning. They threw garbage on the floor. They piled up dirty plates, empty beer cans, and empty liquor bottles in the corners. They threw rolls of toilet paper everywhere, creating a messy web. The room was full of dirty clothes and spilled drinks. It smelled like a dirty pub at 4 in the morning. They built a physical prison of trash. And then there was the fuel. You cannot talk about pornography without talking about the drugs. It was not a fun, party kind of drug use. It was a dark, numbing, self-destructive abuse. They were drinking massive amounts of alcohol every night. They were using heavy drugs like LSD to burn their minds and cocaine to stay awake through the long paranoid nights. Under these extreme conditions, your brain stops working normally. Paranoia sets in. You start to hate the people around you. You jump at shadows in the room. Now, listen to the opening track, 100 Years. It does not start with a nice melody. It starts with a harsh mechanical drum machine pattern. It sounds like a factory machine that is about to explode. Then the guitar comes in. But it does not sound like a normal guitar. It sounds like a siren warning you of extreme danger. And then Robert Smith sings the famous line, "It doesn't matter if we all die." Every single song on this album is built like a heavy dark room with no doors. Listen to a track like The Figurehead. Simon Gallup's bass lines are thick and repetitive. They pull you down to the floor. Lord Tolhurst's drums are tribal, slow and heavy, and over all of it, Robert Smith screams and cries, layering his voice over and over until it sounds like a choir of ghosts trapped in the walls. They were pouring all their fear, their anger, and their deep depression into the tape. But the pressure in that dirty room was too much. The band was a ticking bomb waiting to go off. When the album was finished, they had to go on tour to support it. They called it the 14 Explicit Moments Tour. But by this point, they were completely broken. They were drinking heavily just to find the courage to get on stage. They hated the music they were playing, and the personal tension between Robert Smith and bass player Simon Gallup was reaching a breaking point. The explosion finally happened in Strasbourg, France. It was late at night in a dark nightclub. An argument started between Smith and Gallup. It was over something completely stupid, maybe an unpaid bar tab. But the stress of the dark music, the drugs, and the absolute exhaustion took over. Words were shouted, then punches were thrown. Robert Smith and Simon Gallup had a violent, bloody fistfight right there in the middle of the club. They beat each other up. That was the final breaking point. Soon after, Simon Gallup bought a plane ticket and flew home. He quit the band. The Cure, as everyone knew it, was dead. Robert Smith went back to England entirely alone. He had gotten exactly what he wanted. He made this dark masterpiece, and the process had completely destroyed his band. It took years for The Cure to rebuild themselves. Robert Smith eventually brought Simon Gallup back. They healed their friendship, and they went on to make happier, bigger pop songs that conquered the world. But Pornography stands alone. It is the final bleeding chapter of their Gothic trilogy. Here's the thing, when an album is made with so much pain, so much anger, and so much real destructions, it usually fails. It becomes a mess that no one wants to hear. But Pornography did not fail. Today, it's considered one of the greatest, most pure post-punk albums ever made. But why? Why do we listen to the sound of three men losing their minds? Think about our modern world. We live in an age where everything must look perfect. We take perfect photos, we post perfect updates, we are told to smile, to stay positive, to fix our problems with a good attitude. But human beings are not built like that. We all have moments where we feel useless, angry, or completely broken. Pornography is important because it does not lie to you. It does not tell you that tomorrow will be a better day. It does not offer you a fake smile. It gives you a space to sit in the absolute dark. Sometimes when you hit the absolute bottom, you do not need someone to tell you to cheer up. You just need a voice to sit there with you in the dark and say, I know, it's awful. The Cure built a house out of their own nightmares in 1982, and for over 40 years, people who feel lost have gone inside that house to find strange comfort. Because sometimes the only way to build a new life